It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. All right, latest National Hurricane Center update on Hurricane Milton. Still 160 miles an hour, so a Category 5. Should start slowing down in the next few hours here as we get through the day, as it gets closer. From watching so much yesterday, you know, I had the coverage on all day. That's the only thing my TV was on.
Right.
Now, I had landscapers around the house yesterday. So I was out there doing stuff, but I'm just like, no, I'm keeping it on all day. And so it's really interesting just to watch weather. I mean, weather is fascinating. It really is.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't want to be responsible for forecasting something like this and get it wrong. That's you and I said, well, okay, the pressure is really on. Having a couple of inches of snow or a sprinkle of rain is different than something like this. But right now, 160 mile-an-hour winds. I guess the barometric pressure dropped a little bit again. So it's going down again. But they expect it because of the jet stream and the dry air to slow the wind speeds, not the movement of it necessarily of the hurricane, which right now is it still at 12 miles an hour?
It's still moving it's moving now at 14 miles an hour.
All right. But we're talking about the speed of the winds, supposed to slow it down to probably a high Cat 3. I read another article that said it could even be lower, but I don't know. They didn't explain where they got their information from.
Well, it was one of the early models at the beginning of the week that was and it was just one model that was showing that there was a possibility that wind shear could slow those high wind speeds down as it came ashore just before it made shore. So part of that forecast model, at least some of the elements are still in effect here, as that it is expected to weaken. But the problem is that the entire wind bands, the wind field of this storm, the footprint of this storm is expected to grow. And that means you're going to have tropical storm force winds in areas. In fact, they believe it will pretty much be most, if not all, of Florida. And there's also, with this latest update that came out just minutes ago, tropical storm warning for part of the Georgia coast. That was a tropical storm watch leading up to just a few minutes ago. It's now a tropical storm warning. So that tells you the size of this hurricane and the potential here for the damage as it will make its way across Florida late on Wednesday, and as it gets back out into the Atlantic, will still be a hurricane, probably not a major hurricane, but will still be a hurricane. And it's one of those storms that they're going to write about for a long time. It's one that will be remembered because of its size and because of the strength.
We talked to the National Weather Service in the first hour of the show, and they were telling us that the projection now seems to be a little south of Tampa, probably more heading towards Sarasota. That's the eye of the actual hurricane.
Right.
And again, the problem with that is you're more, the more south you are down near Fort Myers, you're on the dirty side of it. But the fact is that Tampa then is not as much when it comes to the
storm surge.
Yeah.
And in some cases, in fact, meteorologist George Rizzuto telling us from the National Weather Service earlier that we could see 10 to 15 feet on the storm surge. That's catastrophic storm surge at its worst, in the worst hit areas from Milton. And it's, one of the things that was being made, one of the points being made about Tampa is like a lot of coastal areas, you're just a few feet above sea level. You're right there. And so if you're looking at, let's say, an area that's a few feet above sea level and a 10 to 15 foot storm surge, you can do the math right there. And that puts a two-story building, a two-story home structure underwater, a one-story, which many of the homes in Florida are one-story. The older homes would be well underwater. These structures would be well underwater. And that is the deadliest potential of any hurricane, is the flooding from storm surge and heavy rain.
DeSantis was talking about the fact that, because of the laws down there, the homes that are built are a lot more wind resistant than they used to be.
Yeah. There was the Mexico Beach home was one that I forget which hurricane it was, but in Mexico Beach, Florida, the guy built a cement home with cement pillars. He went well into the ground with those and really only had a couple of broken windows after that storm. And insurance companies and builders alike were taking note of what he had done. And they have changed the engineering and structure composition, because you have to. If you're going to rebuild, you're going to have to rebuild stronger.
A real good friend of mine lives in Clearwater, and she was and I've been to her house before numerous times when I've been there, and I didn't even realize it, but she told me the other day, she said, my house is concrete.
Yeah.
She goes, I've got a concrete house. I go,
yeah.
Well, and this was built, I think, in the 60s. But I was like, wow. And she said, yeah. She said, so, the walls, I have hurricane windows, the house, except for you always worry about the roof,
right.
Of course, with winds like that. And then trees falling. Now,
but I believe there's a special anchoring of the roofs too, if I'm not mistaken, even in those zones as of late. When they put a newer roof on, it's probably code. I don't know the details of that, but I've seen some notes on that.
And so she's in a complete. She's not that. She's probably 7-8 miles from the coast, but in a complete. And when she first told me, I'm like, And I remember you and I looked at it. We started looking at the evacuation zones in Pinellas County and Hillsborough County and everything else. And there's just areas that apparently are just up higher, and they're not in any evacuation zone. And I think most of the Tampa area, I think A, B, and C, I believe. I know Hillsborough's A, B, and C. I'm not sure about Pinellas County. Tongue twister there. Pinellas County. I've been there so many times. I know the places, but I'm like, wow. And we looked. It's like, yeah, her house is completely in a non-evacuation, because it's A, B, C, D, and E, I think, and then mobile homes, which is a separate one. But I'm telling you, I mean, I used to think, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years ago, even longer. I remember, because one of my first jobs was I worked in Fort Walton Beach, Pensacola area, but I lived in Navarre, which is right between Fort Walton Beach and Pensacola. Beautiful place. It's grown 10 times since I was there, but still the beaches are just beautiful. The whitest, I'll say this, and I don't know if anybody's ever done a contest, the whitest sands on the planet.
Right.
Where you can mistake it for snow.
Right.
When I went to Hawaii, after living in Navarre, probably 15 years after that, I was disappointed.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this is just, it's like brownish sand. Come on, this is Hawaii. Imported, get it in. And so it's a great place to live. I never had to worry about a hurricane when I was, when I was there. I never really thought about it, but I remember always thinking, I got to go back there when I retire and live. I got to get a place on the beach. Now, as I'm older, I wouldn't want to go. My buddy Jerry, now, this is, I think, twice in the last 2 years. Yeah, because they didn't evacuate 2 weeks ago. They were fine, but now they had to. I mean, they're in the flood. They're in the flood evacuation zone, but twice now. Twice in 2 years, they've had to leave.
Well,
once and go way up north in Florida.
There was a story on the remnants of, or in the wake of Helene, those that were affected by Hurricane Helene, and one family they focused on. They said, "Look, our neighborhood has been underwater 4 times over the last 5 years." I think they said four times over the last 5 years. We can't rebuild. We're not. We don't see a reason to rebuild because of that risk. And they had decided already they weren't going to after Helene. And now Florida being hit again now later this evening with Milton. And you have to look at the engineering that goes into the building of structures, because there are plenty of people that are going to stay and other people that will move there. But those structures have to be safe. But even with the safe structures, you have to talk about the infrastructure in terms of being able to deliver the goods needed, the power infrastructure, which is greatly going to be affected because trees come down, they take down power lines. Power lines come down and have to be repaired, and that can take who knows how long. There's always a question mark. Nobody knows. And so when you can't restore that power, you don't have, and then local businesses can't provide. You're basically left to local officials providing the very basics, but you have limited access to your home, if any. And ultimately, long term, you have to think about whether or not it's sustainable, whether you can live there. And you can have a great structure, even inland. You can be relatively safe, but the problem is if it's causing a great amount of flooding and power outages, is it long-term a viable place to live? And I love Florida. I've been a number of times over the years, and it's a great state. I think they have a lot going for them. But wow, they get hammered over and over. The number of storms you and I have covered just over the last 20 years together, and that just scratches the surface on what that state has dealt with, being where they are.
I would tell you, though, the closest to home was after Katrina. Which one was that after Katrina?
Rita.
Yeah, Rita.
Yeah.
When you and I, for a couple of nights in a row, all we were doing was talking to people coming up I-45.
Yeah.
Remember that, to Dallas?
Right.
And that was just a night. And people... Now, I did see DeSantis yesterday saying, they've got supplies of gasoline.
Yeah, right.
He didn't get into specific details of it, but it was almost as if we've got crews to go out if your car, if you're stuck in a traffic jam and you're causing it, because that you saw they're using the shoulders of the road and everything else. But a lot of people wondered why they didn't close down the other side of the highway and everybody go in the same direction. They say because they need it open for emergencies.
Yeah, right.
And they made that clear. They go, not doing that.
Right.
And so, and to get everything in afterwards, I did see the dome in St. Petersburg with all these cots for emergency people that are going to be ready to get out there, linemen and everything else that are hunkering down there for as soon as this thing goes through. Because there's going to be a ton. The most heartbreaking thing, and as I said earlier in the show, but it's worth repeating again because it's so heartbreaking. The people that have really emptied all of their homes of all the water damaged furniture, everything, appliances, everything, and put them out in front of the house, and they didn't even have time to clear it before they had to leave again. And they're not living in their house right now; they're living somewhere else, but there's nothing they can do. And all this stuff is sitting on the side and probably may end up, if it flies through the air, damaging their home even more. It's just heartbreaking to see that.
Well, it is. And you look at that, the staging that goes on, and it's what is really the storms have ensured that Florida for quite some time will be what they call a consumption state, because there's so much going into that state in terms of resources to rebuild quite often after storms. And so it really makes it tough on businesses. It makes it tough on residents, but everything first and foremost ahead of Milton is about getting people out of the way. And let's hope and pray that that is the case with most everybody, if not everybody, with this storm. You look at the numbers with Milton, and this is a deadly storm in the making. There is no way around that. You cannot survive a storm like this, and you must be out of the way. You must get to a safe spot. Whatever is going to happen afterward, nothing is a priority over your life.
As DeSantis was saying, he said, if it hits, at 110 to 125, a lot of structures can handle that with the new codes. He said, you can't survive the surge. You cannot survive the surge.
It's always the most deadly part of a storm. I mean, we've repeated that, it seems too often just in recent weeks with Helene and Milton and other storms, but it always is. The flooding, the surge, combined with the rainfall amounts, the flooding is the most deadly part of any hurricane. And
I never really, I remember hearing stories of, what's the one that hit Gulfport, Mississippi back in the late 60s, I believe it was. Camille.
Oh, Camille.
Because I knew people, and when I worked in radio down there, who would work near there.
Yeah.
And that's all they talked about was Camille. And this was, I worked there in the 80s, so that hit like 17, 18 years beforehand. They said that was it. That was the one where you knew you couldn't survive, hurricanes that powerful with the surge that happened. That's where the group of people had the party in the hotel, and the hotel was just blown right out. It was gone. They were all killed in it. And so you look at that, and like I said, the Fort Myers stuff, the camera they had at Fort Myers for Ian a couple of years ago, that showed a 15-foot surge. Yeah. Mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is.
You see it. You see all these places there, and then it hits, and then it goes away. Even in the time lapse, everything's completely destroyed. Homes are gone.
Right.
Just gone.
Yeah.
And they still aren't close to down there. That's why in Fort Myers, they're going to get hit probably on the dirty side.
Right.
And they haven't even close to clean up from 2 years ago.
Yep.
866-90 Red Eye.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
One of the areas under study by the Agriculture Department in recent years to improve competition and fairness in various ag markets.
We've begun that process of amending and strengthening our Packers and Hog Yard Act, for example.
Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack last week in Wisconsin. Tuesday at the White House, the Secretary announced an advance notice of proposed rulemaking seeking comments on new approaches regarding base price development for what is known as alternative marketing agreements within the Packers and Stockyards Act. The announcement was one of several on USDA competitiveness efforts, including increased transparency and researcher access to seed germplasm for breeding and crop diversity, as well as an interim report on proposed improvements in competitive conditions in the meat retail industry. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
It's Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara along with Eric Harley.
Gary, coming up after the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk with Michele Woodhouse, a friend of ours and a great radio host, the host of Counterpoint, the Michele Woodhouse Show, heard on Red Eye Radio affiliate WPTF in Raleigh, North Carolina. For those that aren't aware, the issues there after the storm, the remnants of Helene hitting there, and how it's affecting North Carolina voters. Michele, who is also the chair of the Western North Carolina Republican Party, is going to tell us what displaced individuals there need to do in terms of being able to vote. She's coming up next.
from the Uniden America Studios.
And I'm Gary McNamara along with Eric Harley. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose if you can't listen live overnight.
We are looking for Hurricane Milton to make landfall late today in Florida. And our friends all over the South and Southeast are still in cleanup mode, maybe in some cases, not even a cleanup mode from Hurricane Helene and the remnants of Helene, including a number of displaced individuals, as you know, a great number of them in North Carolina. Our friend Michele Woodhouse, who is the host of Counterpoint, the Michele Woodhouse Show, heard on Red Eye Radio affiliate WPTF in Raleigh, North Carolina. She's also the chair of the Western North Carolina Republican Party. That's right there in the Asheville area. And she's been on top of this, what's going on with displaced voters, how they need to be identified, what they need to do to vote if they're not at home. Let's get her on right now and welcome her to the show. Good morning, Michele. Welcome.
Hi, Michele.
Hi, good morning, guys. Great to hear your voices.
Great to
Same
hear
here.
yours, especially this early. But we know I can tell you and your other half, Eddie, are always working around the clock for the people that you care about there in the great state of North Carolina. I know I can see the passion. We hear the passion on your program on WPTF. And now, and we know that carries over as your job as chair of Western North Carolina Republican Party there in the Asheville area. We've seen this become a national story now, Michele, of these displaced individuals being displaced from the storm, Helene. And now, what do we do about Election Day? So many stories surrounding this topic in recent days. Tell us where we are as we sit here this morning, Wednesday, October 9th. What is the Republican Party doing in that area to make sure people can vote? What are state officials doing? Give us the landscape as to where we are there.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because, less than 2 weeks ago, we knew eyes were on North Carolina. Obviously, there's no path for Donald Trump to the White House without winning North Carolina. Kamala Harris does have a path, as we saw in 2020 for Joe Biden. So eyes have been on North Carolina through this election with the devastation that came into the western part of the state through this devastating hurricane. All of a sudden, all eyes in the country are really on about 14 counties in the state of North Carolina, counties that went for Donald Trump, with the exception of Buncombe County, where Asheville is, that we have affectionately called the San Francisco of the South, very liberal area.
Yeah.
But this is Trump country here, and so we're now in recovery mode.
Yeah,
We've
sure.
gone, things have really changed on the ground here. We've had so many people displaced out of their homes. The devastation to homes and businesses and families has really been at the forefront, right? Locking arms with our neighbors, helping people. You really saw this felt like September 12th in many ways, and has really every day for the last 9 days. And our prayers go out to our neighbors to the south. Florida prepares for something that will probably prove to be much even bigger than Helene. So much happening in the southeast right now. But we had to quickly pivot just a couple days after the storm hit to how this impacts the election, because we know how important the voters are out here. And we also know people, they want to be able to express their opinion in this upcoming election.
Yeah.
Early voting starts here next Thursday. And what you saw the moment that Kamala Harris had a news conference and said to the people of Western North Carolina who were knee-deep or waist-deep in mud, really probably at that moment, literally, you're going to get $750. We've been giving hundreds of millions of dollars to illegal immigrants, billions to Ukraine. A couple days after she says this to North Carolinians, gives $157 million to Lebanon. The people of Western North Carolina understood very quickly where they stand with this administration, the little value that this administration puts on the people of Western North Carolina who built these roads the first time and are rebuilding these roads today, who are taking care of their neighbors with little to no help from FEMA, little to no help from the Harris-Biden administration, and they are motivated more than ever to get to the polls. We've been working really closely with the Board of Elections to put in place special provisions. Of course, we blocked the Democrats who wanted drop boxes and online voting. Well, we don't have anywhere to put drop boxes, and we're surely never doing that in North Carolina. And you can't online vote if you don't have Wi-Fi, a phone, a computer, or a house.
Yeah.
So we have been making sure, if it's going to take riding on an ATV out of a devastated little holler in western North Carolina, the Republican Party is doing everything we can here to make sure that every one of our voters can get out and make their voices heard starting next Thursday.
Are there going to be new voting locations that are publicized?
There are. So of the counties that were part of this emergency order, there's really only about 13 that have truly, the devastation has impacted and needed a shift. Every Board of Election office is open, everyone. No ballots were lost, no counting machines were lost. So that is great news. We are going to be adding voting sites. We didn't lose any of our early voting sites to the storm, which is really kind of truly miraculous. But we're going to be adding voting sites, especially in the northern areas, Avery County, Mitchell, Madison, up where people have seen the videos of Chimney Rock and Lake Lure, where the devastation was really unbelievable. Yeah. So we're going to be adding additional sites up there to make it easier for people to get to an early voting site, really looking at roads that have been washed away, helping to make sure that the voters in that county have the easiest path to a building, even if it's a temporary building, if it's a National Guard tent, whatever the case may be. We are doing all that we can on the ground. We started meetings yesterday across our district at boards of elections, adding sites, moving sites, closing some sites if necessary because of population shifts, and moving them to a different location in the county. So the work has already started, and we will be ready on Thursday. And I can tell you guys, the motivation on the ground here in western North Carolina to send a very clear message to an administration that thinks that people who lost everything, the God-fearing, gun-toting, MAGA Mountain deplorables, as I like to call us, $750. People see that, and they're motivated more than ever.
Well, you know what I saw about the $750, because the administration say, well, that's just the beginning of it. But you look at it and you say, when you've lost everything, $750 doesn't really cover anything that you need. But the fact that you need to go online to get the $750, and right. I was thinking that when Eric and I've been talking about the fact that in just the last month I had to get renew my already Texas driver's license that was already the
already established. That had the
what do you call it? I could fly.
Gold star?
Yeah, I had the star on it, so I could fly anywhere. But I got finally TSA pre-check. I had to renew my passport, and I had to get a new license. Now I've got an electronic history that is easy to follow. Everybody knows who I am, yet I had to make sure I had my birth certificate, I had my driver's license, I had to make sure that I had a utility bill just to make sure. I had to have my old passport, had to have my old license in order to get all these things, give fingerprints, just all this stuff in order to get to it. I'm a citizen of the United States, and the story comes out from the IG that, well, no, basically migrants are saying, well, we want you to identify yourself. Well, what if they don't have identification? Well, just let them in and give them a court date later on. Well, that's infuriating, just like it would be even if 750 was a lot, to say, well, you can get it as soon as you can get online. We've got no internet service. We need the money now. That kind of thing just drives people crazy.
It does, and it shows the ineptness of bureaucracy. It shows how tone deaf and out of touch they are with what's really happening on the ground here in western North Carolina and all areas that were hit by this hurricane. That you hear story after story of the people that are going online who lost everything, and they don't even get awarded the full $750. And I know people have probably asked themselves this question: But in North Carolina, you can't buy mudslide insurance. It's not something you can add to your home. So these are acts of God. They're not covered by homeowners insurance. If you live 3,800 feet up a mountain, you don't have flood insurance. Why in the world would you ever have flood insurance?
Right.
So most people here, their homeowners insurance is not going to cover it. And the rebuild process will be so incredibly long. When we look at areas like stretches of I-40 that connect North Carolina and Tennessee that are gone, that half the road is gone. We're talking 3-4 years. It took 15 years to build that highway. So the rebuild process will be long and complicated. But as you were listing all the things that as you said, I'm going to renew my license and do all these things, all the listeners know that in and of itself feels like an act of Congress under normal conditions.
Right.
Imagine trying to do this under the conditions that people are under now.
We're talking with Michele Woodhouse, the host of the Michele Woodhouse Show on Red Eye Radio affiliate WPTF in Raleigh, North Carolina, and chair of the Western North Carolina Republican Party, about people who have been displaced from Helene and are still in fact, very beginning of rebuilding efforts, as you point out, Michele, and how it affects their ability to vote. So what has the outreach been by those voters who have had to go out of state? Maybe they found some respite with a relative that is not in North Carolina. What kind of outreach has there been to those individuals? How do you reach those individuals when it's kind of hard to put a finger on the number of individuals of not only that number, but where they might be? What is that effort like?
Yeah, the Get Out the Vote effort really is just beginning. So our Board of Elections at the state level had an emergency meeting on Monday to put in place really what the new rules of engagement might look like, and we feel very good about those. Our General Assembly voting today on any final changes legislatively to what the election will look like, and then we're watching our county boards put in place the structure. So we really kind of needed the structure before we could click over into tactics on getting out the vote. But the Get Out the Vote effort will be a full force in a traditional way, but also a non-traditional way. Finding out how do you meet people where they are, sending what we call MAT teams, they're mobile action teams, a bipartisan team, into shelters here where you have hundreds of people housed in the ag center and at churches where we have shelters set up, being able to reach out to people who have left Western North Carolina, they're living out of state or in other areas of the state, to walk them through the process, because they do have internet where they are, to get online and order their absentee ballot to have sent to them so that they can vote that way, or to let them know when they come back into Western North Carolina where they can go vote. We stood very firm on keeping true to the need for voter ID. If you've lost your license, we do have provisions for that. Your vote will still count. So the processes needed to be in place. Now we're really flipping into tactical mode on getting out the vote. I'll share a funny story, if I may, with you and the listeners. 2 days ago, I had two gentlemen walk into one of our Republican Party headquarters here in the mountains, and they were so angry about the response of the federal government. Both lifelong Democrats immediately switched their party affiliation to Republican. On the side of a Democrat Party office, there's a very colorful some graffiti that has been colorfully painted on the side that let Joe Biden and Kamala Harris know what they thought of the $750 from FEMA.
Wow.
And so, we're reaching out. You can feel the emotions are incredibly high here for a litany of reasons. But the motivation to get out and vote, the motivation to make sure that people will traverse whatever it takes. This is a group of, long before Helene, this is a very strong, patriotic, salt of the earth area. The mountains of North Carolina are incredibly beautiful. The people that live here, amazingly resourceful, kind of like to live a little off the grid in some ways.
Yeah.
Right. That's why we choose to live here. But we will be out getting voters to the polls no matter what, come heck or high water. We literally have lived through the high water, so now we're ready to make sure that people get there, do what they can do. Listeners can go to nc11.org, which is the website for the Republican Party here. You can donate there. You can see what how to get involved. If you're a voter here, you can see kind of the steps on what you need to do. And if listeners want to donate, Samaritan's Purse is another great way to go. They have been the beacon of light here in Western North Carolina. 95% of the donations that have come in.
Excellent, Michelle. Thank you. We are flat out of time, but we're going to keep our listeners posted on the progress, and you keep us posted so we can do that. Michele Woodhouse, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate your time this morning.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's our Carly. I'm Gary McNamara. Have a wonderful day.
All eyes on Hurricane Milton hitting Florida late today.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.